Good evening, this is Ronald Allen, managing change through effective communications. Today's discussion is all about Coach This. And when we talk about Coach This, we're really talking about the nuts and bolts of how we relate to one another and how we can use both coaching and mentoring methodologies, strategic interventions, to help address some of the most significant challenges we're all faced with. When I talk about significant challenges, I'm going to refer to the very personal things that we don't want others to know. That's why today's discussion is Coach This. Now, it's easy, and most practitioners come from a position of what you should do. So if I don't have a mindset that blends with what you're saying, exactly where does that leave me as a potential service provider, client, parent, guardian, someone who's supposed to have the best interest of those that you serve or those that you mentor or even support on a day-to-day basis? What if you found that the individual was insistently opposite and obstinate about their position on views in life? Would you throw up your hands and say, this person is intolerable, this person is out of touch, this person doesn't understand? The challenge with these perspectives is that it doesn't take into consideration that other person's programming. So when we talk about Coach This, are you ready to acquaint yourself with that other culture? Culture being the way the person thinks. In addition to culture, nationality. When we think of a leopard cannot change its spots, a rat is cornered and behaves a certain way, do we realize that we're actually subscribing human behavior to an animal that is significantly more consistent than we are? You see it in lab tests all the time. You see it in behavioral studies all the time. The animal literally folds into itself. And compared to humans, we in many cases, thrash out. We become angry. We become violent. We become obstinate. We push back aggressively. Whereas many animals will start to realize this is not working out. We've seen this in female animals as well. They will kill their young because what they see as the future is not in their best interest. So when we think about Coach This, are we ready to go to those dark places? Are we ready to really begin to include our deepest fears, that we are mortal, right? We're not going to live forever immortal. We're not going to live forever. We are going to find that there are forces stronger than our own desires, our own wishes, and so we have to succumb or move out altogether. The reason why I'm talking about this tonight, Coach This, is because as much as I have looked for and searched for a new career, a better environment, sought advice and invested both time, money, and mental fortitude, I'm finding myself in a quandary, a financial quandary. So what do we do? What do we tell the client when they find themselves up against the proverbial brick wall and they don't think that there's an alternative? Well, I've found a few potential opportunities, reasoning, processes, methods, ways of thinking that can move me during the course of the day from a state of this is not going to work out favorably to, okay, there's an opportunity. What else can I do? And with the way technology is today, and we have to always include technology because it allows us to reach out to such distant and in many cases typically unreachable people and resources, that it can help us begin to address some of our biggest challenges. And I'm going to give you 3 specific examples that I've experienced recently. One has been, and I've used this expression before, take your people, if you do any kind of facilitation, any kind of coaching, any kind of even civic responsibility, civic duties, take your people to the safe island. What do I mean by that? Had a situation, for those that would flip off the deep end, I won't be too specific, but let's go with this, all right? Had a situation where an individual was not responding at all to the advice that they were given from a different body of people. Let's say a body of people. It was a group of people. And I was asked to just speak with them. My very first question was not a question at all, but rather just sitting still. I wanted to see what that would do to their persona, right? Instead of inflicting or demanding through question, that is a demand, right? I just sat still. And the individual began to turn in the chair and look at me in a curious way. So now he's feeding back, how can I disrupt your messaging? How can I disrupt whatever you're trying to do to me, which may or may not, I wasn't sure at the time, make me feel comfortable? So I opened up. I just simply said, how do you feel? And the individual kind of fell back a theoretical response. About what? So I said, well, what is on your mind? Well, that allowed us, and it seemed that nobody else took that approach to get the individual to come from their perspective. So for example, and this is that's the story, right? We had an individual who was not getting along with those that he was entrusted to. I was asked to speak to them, the individual, and instead of asking a question, instead of demanding something from them, I just wanted to see what state of mind they were in. Because sometimes as I meditate, if I go for a walk, if I go and do my exercise, I don't want to be interrupted. And since this was something that he was made to do, at least I wanted him to know that it's going to be pretty much on your terms. Because I am not struggling, fighting. There's no psychological mumbo jumbo here. It's straight talk. An example is when we do Toastmasters, and I had a session tonight, we had a contest yesterday. And many of the speakers, presenters, seem to try to replicate a Toastmaster model. Others try to replicate a speaker of what they feel is the right style. A young gentleman came up, he must have been maybe 21, 22, and he made so many ums and ers. And yet what he said about his grandmother, impact on his father, related to his relationship with his father, said to me that that was his message for the night. And I pulled him aside afterwards and I just said, you know, your hesitancy showed me that you are passionate about that story you shared with us. And he said, well, what about the ums and the ers? Because you guys monitor that, and we do. It's a grammarian. And I said, that'll come in time. Listen to a lot of statesmen, a lot of politicians, a lot of so-called key speakers in their respective field, scientists, doctors, etc., lawyers. And the hums and the ors come as if that's the conversation. So he had a chuckle about that, and we separated and went about our way. And so when we think about helping ourselves and others, are we coming truly from their position, and are we using an already expected code of communication that already disrupts a favorable outcome? So that's one example I wanted to share that with you. Before I get into another example, I just want to ask, and maybe again from some of you who will be willing to just share some information, I really appreciate that. Those who do, and I guess I got to say a thank you to Daryl, Upundra, excuse me. Jack, how are you? Thank you very much for checking in. Tracy, I know Anne, you're in here. I know you are. Ernest, Melody. Hey guys, Anne is actually first, so there she is. And there are some others. Manabula, how are you? Good evening. I'm not sure if that's okay. Tracy, thank you very much, guys, for checking in there. So we're talking about Coach This. And it's all about the more difficult subtleties of how we engage with one another. Had a conversation with a young lady today, and she does branding, very sharp. And what she shared with me was, how do we communicate to that target market? How do we communicate to that employee that needs some direction, who has done very well, maybe has excelled for a long time and is perhaps not as helpful to the others that would be preferred, right? And I listened to what this young lady was saying about messaging. In other words, how we script things. And how we script things, by the way, guys, it comes out to how do we talk with one another, right? Do we sabotage the conversation? Are we aggressive against the issue or the person? We call that hard on the topic, easy on the person, right? Light on the person. And it brought me to another conversation I had with another person, which was they felt the conversations they were having with their father was very difficult. So I asked them, I said, do you ever ask your father where his personality, where his socialization, his style, his meaning of life comes from? And they said no, they didn't, that they didn't think they could. I said, well, you're at an age where certainly you can. Physically, he's not going to abuse you. I think in many cases it might even turn the tables to know that you are inquisitive to that individual's perspective, being a father-son dynamic. Well, what came out was even more interesting, and that is the father's family style was one of very few expectations. They put very few hurdles in his way, and they certainly did not expect a lot from him. And yet the reverse was now being played on the son, where the father felt the son should do a lot of things and be engaged socially and explore more. And I said, do you think it's because he wants you to, or do you think it's because he feels he didn't do it? Well, fast forward, and we had a couple of sessions. He came back to me and said, you know what? It's because he didn't want to. I said, well, why doesn't he do it now? He has the means. He was a fairly wealthy individual. And he felt that inside was this anvil, this anchor, if you will, and it was holding him in place. How many of us go through our days, go through our emotions, machinations, right? And we're really not playing from the center. We're playing from a little bit over here, a little bit over there. You know, we're kind of hedging, if you will, what we'd like to say, what we'd like to do. Why are we so afraid? Now, in many cases, and I've seen this even with myself, we might blurt out something which is inappropriate, and then it throws the conversation off. That is the courage it sometimes takes. And in doing this exercise with this older gentleman, respecting his father, and then pulling out from his father the fears that his father had, the trepidations that his father showed in his behavior towards his son, even though he was given carte blanche, and now he was telling his son, no, you have to do these things. You got to go out there and enjoy life, because he couldn't bring himself to. Now it's going to be a while, I know that, and he may not. On the other hand, is it always a matter of I did it and I got away? Or is it that we've simply freed our minds to now think of the possibility? Sometimes it takes stages. Sometimes it takes a while. I know in business we want everything done last month, right? Like, what is that? Zero.com, which is Walmart's equivalent to Amazon. The commercial says you wanted it yesterday, right? So now now the logistics people have even more pressure on them, right? Amazon says we'll give it to you in 24 hours. I think it's Zero.com. Says, no, you wanted it yesterday or last week. Go figure. That part, by the way, is also part of our challenges in communication today. We think, and listen to yourself when you speak to someone about your computers, or they're speaking to you about helping you set up your computer or configure something or download a program. I'll do it in a second. I'll do it real fast. I'll get to it immediately. We're literally speaking based on computer time. And our brains, our own computers, take a while because we analyze the information. We don't just act. That's one of the big differences, by the way. A computer, even with AI, will go into that RAM, right, and pull the data and then execute a function. Humans, on the other hand, we assess. Well, wait a minute. Do I want to do that? Is that in my best interest? What are the options? But computers don't do that. They execute based on a set of programmed instructions. So when we think about communications and we think about coach this, have we put ourselves in the right frame, brought the other person or people into the picture, taken them to the safe island so that we can optimize the outcomes? A lot of people might say, oh, God almighty, you're giving aspirin a headache, dude. The benefit of this is that long term and immediately afterwards, people actually say, hey, you considered my point of view. I've never been treated like this before. Well, thank you very much for a great experience. My converse of that is just talk to any child and they'll say, wow, I don't want to be around you, Dad. Or Mom. Right? So we take the example from the real world. We show the application in theory and in the academics. And then we say, well, how can we make this work? How can you, the individual with your diverse background, with the dynamics, the dynamics of your environment, your socialization, right? And we take these strategic interventions and we fast forward them. Because let's face it, guys, we don't want to spend a whole lot of time in the past. Yes, the past is the past is the past, and we have to live with that. We don't have to carry it hook, line, and sinker into the future. We don't have to make it our mantra, right? It doesn't have to be a chorus that we sustain. We can choose, if we put ourselves in the right environment, surround ourselves with the right people, and daily practice. I've said this before. When you have high performance vehicles, you have high performance celebrities, you have the best of the best of the best in military terms, and those who practice their own craft. It could be a modeler, right? They tool with it and they improve on it. In Toastmasters, same thing. We do speeches over and over, and some of us change that speech. We want a different tone, a different cadence, a different speed, more intensity, more control over our hands, using silence. These are the tools. What are your tools? And do you think it would benefit you to put that energy and effort into it so that a day, a week, a month, a year, and you find yourself more confident, you can deliver the information faster? And that's what I learned, by the way, with Twitter. I come from an essay background, so I'm like, prologue, first stanza, etc., etc. I learned Twitter is a very powerful tool to tweak the interest of the reader, then bring them into another level, and then bring them into a third level, and possibly a fourth level, whatever you feel is required, depending on the substance of the topic. A third situation I would like to share with you is interesting because it related to an academic environment where some people were trying to create the business world model of disruption, which certainly companies like American Express, Walmart, Netflix, Amazon, the big boy. I'm not going to say Facebook, because Facebook actually has used a very old process, psychology, human behavior, brought it onto an electronic platform, gave us these tablets, smartphones, etc., handheld, and then supersonic the speed of real-time monitoring who and what we do. So now they have a more accurate beat on what you will do because they know your history. And most of us don't change our behavior. Point in fact. On the other hand, in the educational world, I found that they are looking to adapt and provide the information in a way that the audience is more receptive. Working with an organization, and they're looking to do some business initiatives, looking to bring on those students who are looking in those particular professions, and then give them the ability to create something new, create something that would be unique for their business. And I'm going to kind of talk about construction industry. Okay? Construction is very sophisticated, very all-encompassing, very calculations. Yet many of the people that work in that business, in that profession, do not have a high level of education. So what we came up with, an idea that I thought of because of Lego, is how would they build the building? And then you bring in Fisher Price, which is like metal, like a scaffolding, if you will. And we can use that for plumbing, electrical, heating, ventilating, and air conditioning, all of those other components, and let people see how difficult it is so that they will gain an appreciation and then say, you know what, I want to study that. Who do I have to know? Who do I have to get in touch with? What do I have to do to learn this? And within a very short period of time, we found that students, and some of them were much older, by the way, were beginning to realize that this is also fun. It's also building something. In other words, they're not siloed. They weren't just doing one repetitive widget, repeat function. How many of you have been at work and you're just moving that piece of paper, right? That's all you do all day long, right? Don't have to be in a factory to have a factory mindset, okay? I remember getting up early and having to go into Trenton by the tax office, and there was I've forgotten what I was even there for, but what struck me was the drone type movement of people that were actually going into the tax office. They were like dead. I mean, you put a firecracker underneath them, they'll say, like Lurch, right? In the Addams Family. I think it's the Addams Family. So it's a matter of, in this case, it wasn't so much trying to stimulate the students because they were going into the profession. It was drawing more of their skill sets, their interests, their curiosity. That's another one I just realized. It's their curiosity of what else is going on. What does my part play? How does my part interact, or its significance with the rest of the building? And then you found that people were taking 2 and 3 areas of study, and they could do it because it was more of play as opposed to hard mechanical instruction. Now, one aspect we did recognize is that the personality of the instructors had to be in that new venue. They had to buy into it. So again, right, you have to be able to go into that other person's place. You have to be able to develop the skills to speak with them, not to them, so that you gain their trust, you gain their involvement, you gain their level of compliance, and you don't drag it out like a doctor, a dentist with vice grips going into your molars, right? I remember that as a kid. I can never forget that. This guy, to me, they were vice grips. And he just went into the back of my tooth. I can't remember how old I was. All I know is I saw these big vice grips and they were going at my tooth, and that was it. Didn't want to see another dentist. Anyway, so coach this. Let's look at the hard stuff. Let's be willing to address it earnestly with all sides, because as much as I want what's in it for me, WIIFM, old speak, the real value is when you get to have someone say, I want to work with you again. The heavy lifting is over. The intellectual capital that they will bring to the table will surprise you. Typically, it'll blow you away. The camaraderie that you get out of it, it's like a bunch of engineers or IT guys just working on a project. They love it. Lockheed, one of my best short-term projects. These guys are just in awe. They're just like a bunch of kids in, Funland. When they jump in, we used to jump with the young kids who were young, nephews and nieces on my wife's side when they were very young. We'd jump in there with them, and they'd look like, wait a minute, Uncle Ron and Uncle Miriam, we're supposed to do that, not you. Anyway, so I appreciate you guys listening in. Rich, Jessica, thank you very much. Bring them on camera. They're much older now. They're much older. One's a doctor, one's set up a national program for unemployed. These guys are much older. And the young girl, she went to Hampton University down in Virginia. Beautiful, beautiful campus. First time I ever went down there. So when you talk about coaching, when you talk about coach this, it is when you're in the weeds, when you're in the rut, when you have someone who seems to be difficult, when what they're telling you is they just don't appreciate or respect, yes, they can say that. They don't respect the way you're coming at them. And you have to figure that out. And if you want to use the hammer and chisel, good luck. I like marshmallows. There's another one we put cream into them. I've forgotten what they're called. They're like puffs. Cream puffs. There you go. Cream puffs. Pastry. And that's the approach I would take for longevity. Less energy. Less frustration. More of a willing to bring people along. Dr. Edward Deming spoke about that. Wow. After the Second World War. How interesting. What is old is new again. This is Ronald Allen, managing change through effective communications. You know where to find me.